Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We are excited for what will be a fantastic conversation. Thank you for joining us for the next installment of our series called Conversations with We. My name is Kristen Urea, and I am the chairwoman of our organization. And for those of you who do not know us or are interested in getting to know a little bit more about us, we are a group of women within the CPG health and wellness industry who formed an organization about 7 years ago with a keen focus on really enhancing the future for women within our industry and really, creating a network that helps to support each other and helps to, build awareness for, the advancement of women within our industry. We have a great panel today, super exciting topic. Our next session today is really focused around celebrating International Women's Day. Their 2024 theme this year is called Inspire Inclusion. And today we're going to be hearing from two awesome women leaders and also moderated by a woman, all of which have a focus in their career today within PE and are very well aware and keen on the challenges sometimes that happen within that industry for women and have really been super successful in progressing the value of women and the awareness for women within this workplace. So they'll show their journeys as they work through kind of this great topic today. I'm going to pass this over to Tina Jackse to lead us through our conversation. Tina?
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everybody. I am Tina Jackse for all the people in the circles out there. It's fantastic to be here today. I'm so excited to be moderating an amazing discussion with two amazing women that have just remarkable journeys spanning many, many years, years of inspiration. And it's so perfect that we're doing this for International Women's Day. Quite honestly, it shouldn't just be a day. It should be every day. And the theme for International Women's Day this year, if you didn't know it, was Inspire Inclusion. Okay, so let's think about how we inspire inclusion every single day. It doesn't just need to be one day. It needs to be every day. And I'm going to talk to our two amazing panelists, who I will introduce here in a second, about how they have fearlessly managed and run their career and driven their career and inspired others to make a difference. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our first panelist, Mona Ameli, and she is CEO and managing partner of a strategic consulting firm, Ameli Global Partnerships. She advises CEOs and boards on inclusive strategies. Okay, guys, so think about what questions you want to ask her as we have this great discussion on business transformation. She's the executive chairwoman and chairwoman of the board of Sky Organics, an omni-channel organic beauty, and part of the private equity firm Nexus Capital, which is management's largest CPG portfolio of purpose-driven brands. What's super exciting is she's tracked this career over 28 years. She's a mom. She speaks multiple languages. She's been around the world. So Mona, we're super excited to have you. And we also have Kristen, Recchiuti, who is CEO of Advantix Health. Which is a high growth, diversified platform of therapeutic skincare brands. She has over 25 years of experience in sales and marketing. And Kristen, like myself, started in CPG, started with two massive companies, started with Procter & Gamble, and also with a 20-year journey with J&J, and then made the switch over to private equity. Okay. She has managed challenger brands and commercial public health advocacy, and both Kristen and Mona have also served on multiple boards on CHIPA, been recognized as leaders in their industry. And today we're going to talk about how you did it. How you made the change, how you got started out. So I think first and foremost, I'm going to, go to you first, Mona. How you started, and you've been doing this for 28 years, a fantastic career. What got you into PE, and what has gotten you on this journey of wanting to make a difference every day?
Sure. Thank you, and hello to everyone who's on the call today. It's a privilege to be here today. I'm going to take a minute to talk about who I am versus what I do, because that has shaped actually my journey to where I am today. I was born in Iran. I was raised and educated in France, and I moved to the U.S. 27 years ago. So one of the hardest questions usually for me, it's where are you from? And I consider myself a global citizen and have had the privilege to, because of my personal journey, to be multicultural and multilingual, which actually really kind of paved the path to my journey to where I am today. Because when I moved here to the U.S., nobody knew where I went to university, even though it's one of the top universities in Europe. I had no network of, people here. And my English was pretty limited. I mean, I spoke English, but I had never been in a corporate environment speaking English. So I started from the bottom of the food chain, very, very bottom of the food chain. Even though I have a postmaster and I had the best MBA from Europe, but it was, and that actually became the biggest privilege of my journey, because I started from the bottom and grew up, and that provided me visibility and understanding and learnings about all the different areas of a company that later on served me a lot in my career when I went into general management. So I started, my career path started in CPG almost by accident, not necessarily by choice, but I loved it and fell in love with it, with like many, many other people I'm sure here would relate to. And I found a niche, and again, not by choice, but by accident, that I loved as well. And that it was a career path that was more not your classical path. You mentioned that both you, Tina and Kristen, both went to the classical path of the big CPG companies. I didn't. I couldn't. I, went a different direction. I went into direct to consumer, starting with DRTV, direct response television, infomercial, then direct selling, and then DTC and online. And what was, I don't want to have aged myself, but I started actually in direct mail in France, my career. So that's a long time
okay.
ago.
We still use a lot of that today. You're good.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the old is becoming new again. But that career path was very interesting for me, because I got to get to know the customer very closely. There were not many layers between, what we did and who the customer was. Exactly. I started in international marketing, went into global product development, went into brand management, global brand management, and then international market expansion, and then general management about 14 years ago. And I think that for me, because I look different, I had an accent. Actually, the first years of my career, I had a little dictionary, French, English dictionary, and some of the words that I didn't know, I would write in a little notebook and take home, so that I could actually get the vocabulary and understand some of the business terms that I hadn't really, known when I moved here. And what I found was that there were many biases against someone like me. I mean, in CPG, interesting enough, it is still a pretty male-dominated industry, especially in the area of direct selling and direct-to-consumer that I chose to be in. And so I battled many biases and many, we call them now microaggressions, but at that time we didn't know what it was. I remember being part of the executive team of a very large public company and not being able to get access to their country club where all the meetings were happening. At the door of the country club, they would not let me in, even though I was president of the company.
Oh my gosh!
And I remember sitting in an interview back in the 90s, and after having gone through so many different interviews with other people, the last one, I remember, and I thought I got the job. It was a big CPG company, and they came back and said, no, she has very long hair. She doesn't we don't think that the way she has her hair, that she's actually focused, that I'm like, wow, I thought I was beautiful with
Wow.
my long wavy hair. And that actually, had an impact for me. Now I wear it proudly, but there were many instances where I was the only woman of color, the only woman with an accent. But I learned how to turn that around and make my differences become my advantages. Because I could relate to people, because I could connect, because of what now we call the cultural intelligence, because I had the ability to understand different cultures, and I worked in global environments. And my goal became to make a difference, to come with results, to move the needle. So I became the go-to person in organizations where they wanted to make a change, where they wanted revenue to go up, when they wanted costs to be controlled. And I started having P&L management, which was critical, and for many women as you go.
That's, Mona, that is amazing, because you not only broke, the gender, you look different, you talk different, you had an accent, and you broke through in the room. Kristen, talk a little bit about, you went big CPG. You started with Procter & Gamble, and, went to J&J. Talk to me a little bit about that journey. And, you probably encountered a lot of the similar things, that helped earn you, what shaped you to earn that seat at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just to start and take a step back, because I think it's interwoven in some of the challenges and aspirations I had over this 30-year career. So I am a mom, a wife.
Yeah.
I have an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 14-year-old. And whether you're a mom or you just want a personal life, right? That was a key element of struggle through those years. And
that
so
balance.
Absolutely.
Every day.
So, and it wasn't, I look back on that 30 years and, I had a perspective walking in the door that just great results is all I need. And, found out the hard way early on that was not the case. So definitely I'm compelled to be able to share those learnings and help women along the way. And we've progressed a lot, and we're not quite there yet. But in terms of that pathway, I did start in that classical training. It was amazing. I wouldn't have changed it for the world in terms of what I learned, the diversity of opportunities across functional areas, big brands, small brands. And what that enabled me to do was understand and kind of do that inventory assessment a couple decades in, or 15 years in, to say, here are the things that I love to do. I'm on all cylinders. I'm not frustrated. These are the things, right? And so that inventory in terms of fast-paced environment, minimal politics, non-toxic culture, high accountability and reward for performance. So those things started the conversation that led me down where I am today for private equity. But it was not without challenges to get into it. There's challenges along the way for any woman in leadership. PE is certainly even kind of more scarce in terms of, and I can talk about some of those situations later in terms of barriers or what I found. But that was my interest, and also my story to get in was very much about having male allies to be able to kind of crack through, for people to give me the chance. And then ultimately it's about results and what you're able to do. But without that allyship, that really was instrumental in me being able to make a very big change from big company to this world where it's a very different operating world. And there's question marks as to whether anybody can make the switch, but certainly maybe a few more question marks related to women.
Right. Think about when you were contemplating that change, Kristen, and you're right. It's you think when you're starting out, it's just about results. Talk to me a little bit about, and then Mona, I'll ask you to add as well, encountering the situations where you had to pick your battles.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to dive on a sword on this one. This one really makes me angry, but I got to let go. How
Yeah.
did you manage that? I mean, it's very similar to being a mom. I have
Yeah.
I say I'm a mom of three if you count my husband, my oldest child. But you know,
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that, picking your battle
Yeah.
to make sure, because you're building your brand along the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as much as I wanted to just be myself, and those moments made me angry and, wanted to be able to set the record straight, right? It's a learning journey. And I had to find out the hard way that, that velvet hammer type of approach in terms of providing feedback and coaching and, perhaps different approaches, some of those conversations outside of the meeting, but some of them in terms of kind of what I'm hearing and kind of redirecting was a much better approach. Because if, my type A personality came out, and that competitive spirit, what ultimately happened is I would have been viewed as, combative, debative, closed, and it wasn't the right strategy to get to the right end in terms of providing some coaching and helping people to progress along the way in terms of being better leaders in general, certainly leaders within the room as it relates to interactions with women. It just wouldn't have the right outcome, and it would have, it did at times, reflect poorly on me until I tried something quite different. And so I don't disagree with you. It is a little bit of that, managing children and kind of thinking about like what's the best approach for the best possible outcome. It definitely was learning.
And I have used that statement, velvet hammer, quite often. Okay. Which is usually preceded with my kids of mom's going to pop a cork. So, let's balance that there. So Mona, talk a little bit, because you had multiple biases, okay, and you're pushing to get through that door. Were there instances where you're just like, I gotta just stop, but I'm not gonna forget what just happened?
Yeah, I mean, many times. I still
More
do.
times than you can count.
It hasn't gone away. But I think that several things happen. Is first of all, I shifted from becoming a very passionate, worker and executive to becoming a purpose-driven leader, and the purpose was driving me. A lot of times we get hung up on, I want to do it this way, my way. It has to be this way. And you have to remind the room that it's not about the individual. It's about the purpose of the company. It's about the end goal that we're trying to reach for our customers, for our stakeholders, if you're in a public company. So it's constantly being that reminder. It's also, for me, because of the multiple biases and then multiple challenges, was also about education, about sharing a different perspective. Because when you're sitting in a room and you're the only woman of color, the only woman that didn't go to the Ivy Leagues, known here in the US, then you come up with a different perspective of what maybe others around the table have. And sharing those perspectives, and even sharing, we talked about inclusive business transformation. It's about what inclusion is, because for a lot of people, inclusion is, oh, you have someone who looks different and has a different representation, and you put them around the table. That's not what inclusion is. No. Inclusion is actually giving them,
you're absolutely
exactly, giving them the ability, the power, the voice, and trusting them. So it was about that as well. And a lot of the men that I had the pleasure and opportunity to work with, learn from that. I have one of my colleagues, a male colleague, that now calls it out when it's not inclusive. And I think that's the part that we women play, that yes, there is a velvet hammer, but there is also an opportunity for us to educate and show our different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, I love that transition from passion to purpose driven, but I think it's purpose driven with a passion. Because
the passion never goes away. Yeah. You just remind everybody that we're going after one thing, all of us.
Exactly. And I'm sure maybe you guys have encountered this, Kristen, share with me, two really big CPGs, great brands, very purpose driven, but where, people have said to you, oh, she's just, she's too positive. She's, too excitable. this is too much energy. Okay. How did you deal with it? I mean, we have people of all ages and tenures and different spots in their career. So think about, the very first few times that it happened, then when it happened in the middle, and I'm sure it's still happening today.
Yeah.
Share with us a little bit about, what did you do?
Yeah.
Like, how did you stop it or steer the conversation away from, please don't address me that I'm just too passionate or I'm too excited?
Yeah. No, and I think it's a little bit of what you're saying in terms of kind of bringing it back in terms of kind of, here's the intent, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. But, I think some of them that are more, those instances that are more visible, it is somewhat better than the ones that are invisible, right? So because you have the ability to see it and see what's happening, it's right in front of you, and be able to think about the thoughtful way to be able to best address it. I think it's even more damaging when it's more unconscious and behind the scenes, and you're seeing it displayed more subtly. And I think that's a challenge that persists as well. I think perhaps there's a little bit more or less of that explicit conversation and more of the implicit, which I think is absolutely still there and needs work in terms of education, in terms of allyship, and in terms of all of us at the table being able to advocate for other women and making sure that that voice is understood, that there's respect there. So just, that days of being silent, right, is over. I mean, it's all of our roles to be able to kind of elevate those voices and make sure that the correct conversations are being had and they're substantive.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. So, hey, Mona, when you think about your journey, what would you recommend to the people that are here and women that you encounter, and as you're inspiring inclusion, what would you recommend when they don't feel included? And Kristen, I'll ask you the same way. When you're hit head on with, I just got shut out of entering a building, what's your advice?
That's a good question. And I think that it's not that there is one answer and, one way of doing it. Exactly. For every person is different. They're on their own journey. I think that from my perspective, one of the biggest things is addressing the question of belonging, because for a lot of us who look and feel different, and some are invisible. I think that I want to piggyback on what Kristen says. There are invisible traits of diversity that show up that for many women they're not as in your face. So is addressing that belonging, that what, a lot of times we try to fit in. It's not about fitting in anymore. Because you don't want to change who you truly are, your true authentic self, to be able to be accepted somewhere. And I think that's a mistake that's a journey that I went through. I actually changed my name. My real name is not Mona. Mona was picked up, and when I became an American citizen, it's now officially my middle name. My name is Murnaz. Nobody would hire a Murnaz. I already look different. Wow. I didn't have the right package. So it's like I'm telling the woman, yes, the journey is difficult, but if I was doing it in this day and age, I would embrace who I am a lot more and be authentic from the beginning of my journey. Because what happened afterwards that took me to the C-suite and then to where I am now on the board and in the PE world is that authenticity of who I am, is creating the sense of belonging of who I am and completely embracing it and showing that my differences bring added value to the organizations and not hiding them just to be able to be like everybody else. I think that's one of the first ones. The second one is that the allies that Kristen talked about, two men that have nothing in common with me, were my allies for me to get to where I am today. And what we shared were our values. We shared common values of family, of loyalty, of integrity, of being purpose-driven. And that's what created that connection. So look for allies. Don't think that you have to go and attach yourself to someone who's exactly like you, because I did that as well.
Great point. Yeah.
And look for those who see potential, deliver the results. Also, don't look and go after the title. I see a lot of women, especially younger women, that are always looking to get to that title. It's not the title. Get the work done. Try to learn as much as possible. Get it done. Then they will look at you with the credibility around the table and lead you to there. These are some of the, like, very basic ones that I would say.
Kristen, why don't you share a little bit about, what you have encountered and, similar to, I love fit, you don't want to fit in, you got to be authentic. Talk to us a little bit about some of your tips and tricks and maybe allies that worked or allies that that maybe didn't work and you pivoted.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think my lesson through history is that, the more allies, mentors, and kind of supporters, the better, right? So I think early on, I had more of a limited group that was amazing, and then they might move on, right? And so you just, really building that network for the long haul, I think is critical. And, I remember my first seat at one of those tables, it's really intimidating. So having those allies there to say, Kristen, and start that, just to build that confidence and start to get individuals listening and them as a supporter, that we want to listen to what this individual says, and has to say. And I think the other thing, through history, I think we've all been, students of amazing leaders that set great examples, and then others that we were like, I never want to be like that. And I will say there was a woman leader who's led one of the organizations I was at, who's very much about bring your authentic self to work. And she did. And you know what? It is just so, the power as we, move up in organizations and lead and be able to kind of set the stage in terms of the way it should be and what would enable some of those barriers and those stereotypes to be broken down. It's so powerful as these women leaders, are kind of changing the culture, changing just the landscape in terms of kind of what's the norm, and helping other women to be able to follow in that footstep and gain confidence in kind of their seat and their voice in those rooms.
Okay, that's fantastic. I want to pivot just a little because I want the people on the phone to hear about what are some of the ways now that you're paying it forward so that as they're in their careers, this is what I need to look for when I'm looking for an ally, whether male or female, when I'm looking for that advocate in the room. Kristen?
In terms of, some of the things, I've been really focused on supporting women from the beginning of the clear understanding as the hard lessons learned as I was passed over for things, exceptional results, but not doing some of the other things right. And so that was really, a powerful motivator in terms of, we're not even close in terms of kind of being on equal footing. And so what can I do? And so definitely affinity groups, being able to give back and be part of that conversation and listen to what barriers and things that are still occurring and how can we help together. I think being, a mentor and being very intentional in terms of the leaders that you're bringing into the organization and the support provided. And some of it is structural, right? In terms of, what are those structural barriers that keep women who might have a family, who might want more flexibility, the things that were never even on the table 20 years ago are absolutely there. And that's part of how I've changed even this organization to make sure that some of those barriers, and as I hear more specifically about women and taking these large jobs and kind of, they're pretty intense, right? But and everybody wants that life of this balance. And there's absolutely ways to be able to enable that and make that easier, whether it's through different benefits, different flexibility. And so I'm constantly looking for that, and have made changes even the last year in my organization to make sure that we have the right structure in place, the benefits in place to attract, retain, and just really help these amazing female leaders grow in our organization and beyond.
That's fantastic. Mona, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's important for women to support women. But I think that it's even or as equal for man to continue to support women. I think we can't exclude man from this conversation. I think that we have to continue to share with them the perspective, share with them and help them understand the and I think many of them do now. There is a lot I think a lot more openness around understanding that women are critical to changing organizations, are critical. I mean, when you see turnarounds happening,
Right.
because that's kind of my niche. It's company turnaround. They're bringing in women to do it. But I think it's also really important that women get to stay longer in some of these positions when they're brought in. I think I was reading an article not too long ago that in the S&P 500 companies, the tenure for a woman is about a little bit more than 2 years, and for man, it's a little bit more than 9 years when they bring in, for CEO turnaround. So it's continuing that. I think on my end, what I do a lot of executive coaching for women. And these are women that are high potential women that are either already in C-suite and how to navigate the difficult world of the C-suite, or the ones that are have been passed on many times and deserve to be on the C-suite. So how to get there. So that personal investment of time and experience and sharing and networking, connecting them to the people. But I also think that it's a conversation that we can't just keep within amongst ourselves. It
No,
needs to be definitely a broader conversation.
Absolutely. And a broader and inclusive conversation.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Making sure
Correct.
that we're included. So we have people on the call that are in big companies, small companies, medium companies, some that may be looking to go into private equity. Okay. So maybe talk a little bit, Kristen, like what had you pivot from big CPG? Okay. And then have you found it harder to get that seat, or do you find that you are bringing in a fresh perspective, you've built your network, you have your brand? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, so that inventory assessment I did and kind of learning about, wow, these things that kind of make me, super excited to go to work every day aligned very well with PE. But I think, after 20 years in P&G and J&J, I think, people might assume you're institutionalized to the way, big process and slower and tons of resources. And so it does take a different individual and eyes wide open in terms of kind of, what it's like to operate a company in a PE environment. And and I think for me, and we could talk about some of those characteristics, but I think for me, the hardest part was to validate that the skills and the person who I am as a leader was going to succeed in that environment, that it's not a risky gamble, right? So it's not for everyone. So I think, those male allies just happen to be male allies in terms of that learning journey. It wasn't somebody that I knew directly that ultimately gave me the chance. It was kind of a couple steps removed from that. But that validation from trusted leaders in a private equity world that this is a leader that absolutely would shine in this environment. Here's why. Here's, that helped a lot to get the foot in the door. And then, from there, it's results. Absolutely. I mean, that's the focus. But I haven't found it to be dramatically different than some of the same obstacles I've seen kind of in larger organizations. I really haven't. It's
that's great.
Yeah. I mean, that's my experience over the last 5 years. Most of my experience was outside of PE, but but it's not been sizably different, except that there's less of us, and we've built an organization that is quite different, which has its advantages in terms of talking to potential acquisition targets and female-owned businesses, right? It's the fact that 50% of our C-suite is women, the fact that 65% of my organization is women, that is the competitive advantage. And in terms of kind of who we are and our passions and kind of what we represent, and it has gone a long way. So we are maybe more
exciting.
unique, but I have used that to our advantage as well. And I think modeling and some of the amazing women I work with today, see the possibility of how they might be able to do this and have that same level of balance and negotiate what works for them. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. So Moni, you talked a little bit about when you got into it and how you bring people along. And I love that statistic. I hate the statistic, but I love that you shared that it's about 2 years for a female and 9 for a male. Talk a little bit about if you had advice for people, like how do we together make that 2 years turn to 3, turn to 4? Yes, we know it's purpose-driven results, but patient, pivoting, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that Kristen touched on it a little bit earlier. There is that, for me, I got into PE when I left corporate because at almost age 46, I became a mom very unexpectedly. It was not planned at all. And it completely shifted my world and our priorities with my husband, and having to be in a position like I was and having to be a mom was very difficult. Was very difficult to juggle. How do we help women stay longer? There's no such a thing as balance, but I believe. I mean, we have to be realistic. There's no such a thing as balance. But I believe, and I was actually at a conference for women in California last week. And Jacinta Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, said something very, very interesting that stayed with me. And she said, we don't all have to be superheroes. We're, even Superwoman and Wonder Woman, needs to have a sidekick, have a partner. And I think that part of it, I mean, for the first year that I turned around the company at my last company at Minifast, my husband was the stay-at-home dad, and I had help. We had support. I think that for companies to realize that women, and I became a mom very late in my career. I know that for younger women, it's really, really difficult at the early on of their career to have that. But to be able to understand that, to be able to facilitate the flexibility for women to be able to be moms and to be able to be the turnaround transformational leaders that they are is very important for the boards to understand that. My PE experience, my private equity experience has been mainly on boards, not necessarily as operator at this point. And I believe that that's something that comes from those boardrooms, to be able to look at women when you're hiring them, when you're investing in them, and not only looking at them at coming and getting one job done, but looking at them as a potential to become the next leader of other portfolio companies, of other areas. And I think that short-sightedness sometimes in the case of women is very present in boardrooms, and expanding that is going to make a difference for that 2 years to become a lot longer, because you don't have to constantly make choices. As women, we constantly are making choices. Right. And if you provide us the support, then we can do it. But we need help. I love that. And it's okay to need help.
And it's okay to ask for help. Absolutely. I loved your comment. Every superhero needs a sidekick. Yeah. Absolutely. And
not my saying, Jacinta Ardern's, but yeah.
I love it. I love it. But if you think about it, if male, female, whatever, they're not mind readers. Okay. Right. And you have to have that voice, and you have to have that voice to ask the question, to ask for help. Okay. Kristen, talk a little bit about, do you have any other tips or tricks to say to people, like, get your voice, okay? And how do you find that balance? Because then I'm going to ask you guys when we wrap up, 2 or 3 things, that you feel like could really inspire inclusion, and how do each one of us accelerate progress?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I know that was 2 questions in one, but balancing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it picks up a little bit on what Mona was saying too, in terms of what could need to change in terms of kind of having that voice and having that possibility. And I ended up taking a 6-year detour because it was right for me, this personal professional balance, because it was going the other way, right? I was not satisfied with kind of where that balance was, and it was kind of making me not great at my day job or my mom job, right? So, and I loved what I did. I honestly, and I got exposure to medical, regulatory, advocacy, public health, like all these things that ultimately made me a much better general manager. But what I found on the back end, because I wasn't on a linear progression, is it was really hard to get back into the commercial side. And most of the response was, well, that was 6 years ago. It's almost like you needed training wheels to learn how to be a marketer again. And that was prevalent. And so I think my ask, because it's ridiculous, right? Like, I mean, times have changed. There was obviously a lot of things that moved forward, but if you're a strong leader and and high degree of intelligence, you're going to be able to pick that up really quickly. And so those advocates, and that's what I'm trying to be for others, because sometimes you do need the flexibility. I think hybrid work schedule has helped. I think flexible scheduling to say that you're not making choices, because what would be the difference of being able to go see your son's soccer game at 3:00 and then dialing back in later? I mean, that flexibility and ability to kind of feel like you're able to do both doesn't, I think, take away from productivity and kind of the end result, but gives so much more back in terms of feeling for anybody, men or women, that they are able to do both and do it, to the level of which they see for themselves. So, I mean, for me, flexibility, I think, is core in terms of some of the barriers that weren't there. Here's your linear progression. You get off it, you're off it forever. And, it was an 8 to 8 type of job, which does not work. And so we have progressed, but maybe not as fully as we need to for this to be, a much better opportunity and possibility that women would see it and say, I can do that job. I see there's models out there of how I can do it, and here's how I can do it. And being a voice to advocate and contract and say, here's what I need for this to work. And having allies to support it, but also having the strength to ask for what's needed. Because I think that's also, I think maybe we might be a little bit more gun shy and not wanting to kind of be different and operate in a different way. And I don't think that does us a service. And I think you'd be surprised at the results when you ask pretty reasonable requests to make it work.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. I mean, great point, because I think it's especially Mona, you've encountered it, that I can do that job. However, I'm not going to do it that way.
Yeah.
And the courage to say what it is needed to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So Mona, think about, if you want to, I think we've had a question or 2 come in. I want to make sure that you guys get the opportunity. You've got a great group of people here. Give us a couple of thoughts, tips, or tricks as a mom, as a leader, as a CEO, as a superwoman, as a sidekick. What would you like to leave the team on the phone here with as they're navigating their career journey?
I think that I am, because I'm a very numbers oriented, data oriented person. I look at, am I, or are we doing anything that's making a true impact? That can be seen by numbers, that can be seen by KPIs.
Yeah.
Okay. And I look at KPIs at 3 levels. First, personal. What am I doing? Am I helping people exactly like me? Or am I supporting, helping, mentoring, allying with people that are different than me, so that I can create a broader place and a bigger table for us women? Okay. So I look at that, and I look at the numbers. I look at advancement of some of these women. I look at their career path and what impact I have personally made. Then I look at the company. that either I'm in charge or I'm on the board or whatever. And I say, when I look at the board of directors or the executive C-suite, is it reflective of the US today? Is it reflective of our customer base? Are we in touch? Are we reflecting our purpose, our values, is it, because if it's not, there is a disconnect that something needs to be done. And that is our biggest challenge. I mean, the gender equity report was just published, and the US is one of the worst, one of the lowest. In workforce, yes, we are gender parity. In boards and in executive roles for women, we're one of the lowest.
Yeah.
Compared to Europe, Asia, etc. So, and then you look at, that impact at the global level, and how can we? It starts with micro steps. It starts with us. When I look around my network, the people that I'm coaching, the people that I'm working with, am I adding more people, or am I just relating my own experience going on and with my own people? And the same with the boards. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind and to follow it with specific statistics to know that you're making. If not, we're just talking. We're not doing anything.
Right. Well, Kristen, you commented about, the makeup of your board and the people that you've surrounded yourself with. Obviously, that is accelerating progress. Mona, I loved your comment about KPIs. What gets measured gets managed. Okay. And if we're not, I'm sorry, keeping score, and it's not about win or lose, but it's about progression.
Yes.
So any other thoughts, Kristen, for this great group on the phone of, take this with you and go?
Yeah. I mean, based on kind of my learnings and mistakes along the way, I mean, I just can't say enough in terms of kind of that mentor, network, allies, just really invest in that as if it's, a core component of your job, because it will pay dividends. It's sounding boards, it's advocates at the right time later on, and joining communities like I think it also, it's the networking component, but you're also hearing real life, like there's power in numbers, and hearing other struggles that are similar, tips and tricks from other women who've figured it out, or figured out one like that has been so invaluable. And I think, we've got to be really intentional about proactively, helping to support and find amazing women leaders, and helping them to make that transition. So that's on everybody, right? In terms of helping to pull them up. It feels like we've progressed a lot in that over the last 30 years, where it felt more competitive because there were fewer of us. And now it's all about, we gotta pull others up and help them, not learn the hard lessons we did, and what can we do to kind of accelerate progress in that area.
Fantastic. So Christine, I think I saw a couple of questions come in. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, we did. So first of all, thank you, ladies. What a fantastic conversation. I took so much inspiration from just, how we kind of broke it all down today, talked through the value of allies, talked about your own personal experiences and how you've been able to take all of that experience and create such a fantastic career, but also have such, Mona, you mentioned you want to be a purpose-driven leader, and bringing that to your everyday life, bringing your authentic self. We do have a question in the Q&A that I want to bring forward. Someone had asked the question, how does a woman get accepted when you're constantly reminded that you're not classically trained? So how do you take steps to overcome that perception of the value of your experience, even if it's outside of some of the classical runways that you hear about, and make sure that you're dimensionalizing that value to others, specifically, I would say within the private equity world, which is, a little bit different, as we talked about today. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
That's a great question. Something that I still dealing with today. I think that it's showing that you because you don't want to mimic, you don't want to kind of say, oh yeah, no, even though I didn't do that, I still bring that. No, you show that you bring a different part of a perspective that no one else that was classically trained has. It's showing that added value of your perspective constantly. A lot of times I found that coming from different companies and not necessarily the classical trained, because it's been, smaller companies, it's been that you have a perspective that is more encompassing sometimes, that is more holistic, that is closer to the customer, because the layers and the steps were closer to the customer than maybe in the classicals were. And you bring that additional added value, and that the other ones don't necessarily have, and delivering on it. So saying that, hey, we could do it this way, that way, but then delivering also on it. And once you do it a few times, you become that credible other opinion, other perspective.
Love that. Kristen, any perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's how do you translate it? I think women tend to be a little bit more humble, so we're probably not listing kind of all the credentials and arguing in that, and I don't think it's a great approach either. But like being able to translate kind of various experiences and how it might be unique but very applicable to this, and actually looking at it in a very different way. I think if everybody's the same in the room and kind of gone through the same progression of the career and the same types of companies and types of cultures, right, you're just going to keep repeating that, versus the diversity of thought and really pushing the thinking in terms of kind of different ways of doing things from unlikely sources of inspiration, and trying to drive that with the board and with leadership.
I love it. I love it. Last question might be a little difficult, but I'm just curious. We did talk about the value of bringing your authentic selves to work. Right now, we're talking about a challenge relative to also bringing forward your value that in what makes you unique. Your authentic self, as well as trying to, bring those two things together. Sometimes it's very difficult to be completely honest and bring your authentic self when you're also still trying to prove your value. How do we help those who maybe are earlier in their career to have the confidence to do both, to bring their authentic self to work and feel good about the fact that that's also going to be able to convey that value to companies, and it will be appreciated, and they can feel comfortable to truly be honest and be themselves at work and show up the way that they feel most confident every day, as opposed to the way they feel they have to be from a cookie cutter perspective.
Yeah. I think the starting point of that really is some of the allies and advocates that we talked about, because I think having those conversations and a person in the room to kind of help elevate what you're hearing and how important it is that of what's being heard. And I think with confidence, it comes over time, and you'll find that being kind of that authentic self, even, different experiences I've had where this is it, this is me. And those are some of the most powerful moments I've heard back from others in terms of like, wow, that was really inspiring. And honestly, I wasn't trying to be, it was just who I was. But I think it's just more human and relatable, and gives people the example that, that it is possible, that you can bring your authentic self to work and succeed. But sometimes it starts with, I think, a little bit of support on that front end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I'll get very like concrete, tangible. I think that especially for the newer generation, our newer generation here in the U.S. is a lot more diverse than it's been in decades, ever, especially in states like California, where I am, but also Texas, and some other ones. And I think that part of it is distinguishing between bringing your whole self to work and bringing your authentic self to work. So the whole self, we never take that to home. I mean, to work. Okay. We still have to understand that there are some constraints around the collaboration, the work environment, etc. Some people sometimes confuse that, the whole self versus the authentic self. The authentic self is bringing your true values. Your values, for example, I mentioned family, integrity, collaboration, purpose-driven, passion, some of those things. And a tangible example, for some of these newer generation, women who are here, is that you actually reflect the core of the market, the heart of the market of the customers that most of our companies are trying to get to. You relate, you understand, you are them. So being able to actually voice in meetings, hey, as you're putting together the strategy, just kind of like coming and providing this insight from you that this is what really interests us. We want, for example, you want to be an inclusive brand. Inclusiveness is not just putting like images of some of the women of different colors and thinking that is not what appeals to us. For a lot, for example, I'm working right now on a Hispanic project, US Hispanic, which is the largest market in consumer goods right now. And some of our Hispanic people don't speak up. Don't, even that they are the target audience. They sit in meetings, they get things handed on to them. Go do this. Voice it up. Hispanic is not a homogeneous group. They're heterogeneous by generation, by countries of background. You bring that is your added value. And it comes from your authentic self. It comes from your values about who you are. So I think that it's bringing this distinctions to the table around you can be an added value because of who you are, because you're mostly the customer that everybody is trying to get to. So speak up, and that's your added value.
Kudos. That was perfect. You had a lot of pluses in the chat there. So well said. One last question. What are your recommendations for influencing a 100% male leadership team to embrace different ways of working, different ways to go to market, different ways to support brand growth? What do you think? I'm sure we've all been there.
Showing data. Showing data.
What types of data? What types of data?
If you want to be a relevant brand, a relevant company, a relevant organization today and tomorrow, especially tomorrow, because you're sitting in today making decisions for tomorrow. That's your strategic planning. If you do not look at the data that the purchasing power, for example, we just talked about the Hispanics, it's almost, $3 trillion, fifth largest, if there were a country, fifth largest country in the world. Okay, so if you don't have women, depending on what industry you're in, who are your main customers, if you don't have that perspective built into your organization as you're making those decisions, what impact does this have on your brand moving forward? Only male-dominated executive team or board can only do so much if they don't take into account the statistics of the market data, of customer profiles, of segmentation, of understanding even the US population shifts and who you are going to serve and your products are going to address in the future. You are not going to be irrelevant. You are maybe doing great right now, but you won't be relevant in the future. I think that's where I would go, showing data, facts, numbers to them, and showing them how important it is to include those perspectives into their teams and into their executive boards and C-suites.
I think operationally, once you get to that point, I don't disagree, data is extremely possible or powerful. Relationships to me, you're going to see early on in kind of the dynamics of any of those settings, like where you have some opportunities. And I've found it's to be quite effective to kind of take it offline and start to kind of work on that relationship and share some honest feedback and enable a trust element there that'll start to pay dividends in the broader. So I tend to not take it on as a board of 10, but try to kind of go individually and invest in those relationships. And I think the combination of the two with data plus, goes a long way in terms of starting to kind of change the course and kind of that level of listening and responsiveness.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you both so much.
Tina, any closing
Christine,
remarks?
I'm going to turn it over to you. What a day. I have notes everywhere. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Perfect.
This is great. I appreciate the
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time. For those of you who are new to I just want to remind you, we are always welcoming new folks into our community. And through that, we have committees you can be a part of to help us with all the great and all of the, the women that we have in our network who help and support each other every single day. By clicking on this QR code, it leads you to our website where you can submit a request to connect with us. We'd be more than happy to reach out and have a good conversation about how we can get you involved with our organization. Thank you again to our participants today. Thank you, Tina, for doing a fantastic job of moderating our event. We look forward to keeping the conversation going, and we will see you on our next conversation with We. Have a good day.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Let's go change.